The dark truth about human experiments in history had of some of the world's greatest scientific breakthroughs came at a cost far darker than we were ever taught. What if behind the progress we celebrate were stories of suffering, deception, and silence? This is not fiction. This is not conspiracy. This is the truth about human experiments in history, and some of it was deliberately hidden. Throughout history, science has always pushed boundaries, but sometimes those boundaries were crossed without consent, without ethics, and without humanity. Human experimentation often emerged during moments of desperation, war, disease outbreaks, or the race for scientific dominance. Governments, military forces, and even respected institutions justified these actions in the name of progress. The logic was simple, but dangerous. If the outcome benefits many, does it justify harming a few? This question shaped some of the darkest chapters in human history, and the answers were often terrifying. Let's begin with one of the most disturbing examples, the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. For 40 years, hundreds of African American men infected with syphilis were deliberately left untreated. They were told they were receiving medical care. In reality, they were being observed as their condition slowly destroyed their bodies. Even after a cure was discovered, treatment was withheld, not because it was unavailable, but because the experiment had to continue. Now consider the horrors of Nazi human experiments. During World War II, prisoners in concentration camps were subjected to unimaginable procedures, freezing experiments to test survival in icy waters, infection studies where diseases were deliberately introduced, surgical operations performed without anesthesia. These were not isolated incidents. They were systematic, organized, and carried out under the authority of a regime that saw certain lives as expendable. Then there was Unit 731, a secret military program where thousands of prisoners, men, women, and even children, were used in biological and chemical experiments. Victims were exposed to deadly pathogens. Some were dissected alive, without anesthesia, to study disease progression. These acts were hidden for years, and even after the war, many of those responsible avoided punishment in exchange for their research data. At first glance, these events may seem disconnected. Different countries, different times, different motives. But there is a pattern, a disturbing one. In every case, the victims shared one thing. They were vulnerable. Prisoners, minorities, the poor, the powerless, people whose voices were ignored or never heard at all. And those in power believed they could act without consequence, because history at the time was written by those who controlled it. Eventually, the truth began to surface. Public outrage grew, and the world was forced to confront a difficult reality. Science without ethics is dangerous. In response, new rules were created. The concept of informed consent became essential. No experiment could be conducted without a person fully understanding and agreeing to the risks. Medical ethics evolved. Oversight committees were established, and the idea that human life must always come before scientific progress became a global standard. But these changes came at a cost paid by those who never had a choice. You might think this is all in the past, that such things could never happen again. But history teaches us something important. Progress can blur morality if no one is watching. Even today, ethical debates continue, from clinical trials to emerging technologies. The question remains, how far is too far, and who decides? The past serves as a warning, a reminder that behind every breakthrough, there must be accountability. The truth about human experiments in history is not just about what happened, it's about what we choose to remember. Because forgetting these stories means risking their repetition. Science has the power to save lives, but only when guided by humanity. Because without it, progress loses its meaning, and history has already shown us the cost.